Midnight is not just a time on the clock, it is a turning point. When the world grows silent, something deeper awakens. Noise fades, movement slows, distractions lose their grip. In that stillness, unseen forces become active, and the atmosphere shifts in ways most people never notice. History and scripture point to this hour as a moment of transition. Midnight is not morning or evening. It marks the boundary between one day and the next. Boundaries are where conflicts intensify and decisions are enforced. In many biblical accounts, divine intervention takes place in the dark. Chains fall at midnight. Doors open at midnight. Judgments pass and destinies change while most are asleep. Night is not chosen by accident. Darkness removes human strength and exposes spiritual reality. This is also why battles often grow stronger after sunset. Fear speaks louder. Thoughts feel heavier. Old memories surface without warning. During the day, distractions mask these attacks. At night, silence removes the cover. The body rests, but the spirit remains alert. For those unaware, this hour becomes a point of weakness instead of power. Few are taught this truth, fewer understand its weight. Yet, ignoring the midnight hour leaves many unguarded when they are most vulnerable. Tonight, you will learn why this hour carries unusual spiritual authority. You will understand why prayer at midnight moves differently. You will see how silence becomes a doorway either for peace or for attack, and how to stand protected while you sleep. This knowledge is not for curiosity. It is for strength, protection, and authority. The battles you do not prepare for often choose the night to strike. Welcome to Holy Authority. This channel exists to equip and strengthen you through truth-filled prayer and understanding. If you are ready to walk in spiritual authority, subscribe now and stay connected. Sleep lowers the guard. The body powers down, muscles relax, and awareness fades. This is the moment when defenses drop without permission. Eyes close, but the inner world stays open. The mind may rest, yet the subconscious remains active, processing, remembering, and receiving. This is why sleep is not neutral. It is a vulnerable state. Fear and anxiety understand this weakness. They do not always shout. At night, they whisper. They slip into the subconscious through dreams, sudden thoughts, and unexplained heaviness. Worry that felt manageable during the day gains weight in the dark. Old fears resurface without invitation. The quiet gives them space to move freely. Spiritual heaviness often follows the same path, settling into the mind when resistance is lowest and attention is unfocused. Physical rest is not the same as spiritual safety. The body may lie still, breathing slow and steady, while the inner life remains exposed. Many mistake exhaustion for peace, sleep for protection. But rest only restores the body. It does not guard the heart or mind. This is why people wake up tired after a full night's sleep, unsettled without reason, carrying emotions they did not fall asleep with. Prayer must continue even when the body sleeps, because the spirit does not shut down. Silence does not stop activity in the unseen. It often invites it. Spoken prayer before sleep establishes authority that remains after consciousness fades. It sets boundaries the mind cannot maintain on its own. Prayer covers what awareness cannot reach. It stands watch when the will is quiet. Without it, the night becomes open ground, unguarded and available to whatever seeks entry. Unseen resistance rarely announces itself. It works quietly, patiently, delaying progress without obvious confrontation. Breakthrough does not disappear all at once. It is postponed. Momentum slows. Effort increases, yet results thin out. This is how resistance hides, not through dramatic collapse, but through subtle obstruction that feels like exhaustion rather than opposition. Strength drains without a clear course. Sleep becomes restless, not because of noise, but because the mind refuses to settle. Mornings begin with weight instead of clarity. Small tasks require more energy than they should. The same problems reappear just as they seem resolved. These are not random failures. They are patterns. And patterns point to pressure applied consistently over time. This kind of battle is dangerous because it feels personal. It convinces the mind that the issue is weakness, lack of discipline, or failure of will. That assumption is the trap. When resistance remains unnamed, it turns inward. Energy meant for forward movement is spent on self-doubt. Progress stalls not because ability is gone, but because awareness is missing. Breakthrough is often delayed not by lack of effort, but by misdiagnosis. When the cause is misunderstood, the response becomes ineffective. You work harder where you should stand firmer. You push when you should guard. Unseen resistance thrives in confusion. It survives on the belief that nothing is happening, that the wait is normal, that the delay is deserved. Awareness changes the equation. The moment resistance is recognized, it loses its invisibility. Pressure that is seen can be confronted. Patterns that are noticed can be disrupted. Awareness restores agency. It redirects energy outward instead of inward. This is the shift that precedes not relief, not ease, but clarity. Vigilance has always been required precisely when others choose rest. While the city slept, watchmen remained awake, not because danger was certain, but because the cost of unguarded silence was too high. Their role was not dramatic. They did not fight battles most nights. They watched, they listened, they stood in place when movement felt unnecessary. That restraint was the discipline. Awareness during quiet hours prevented chaos before it arrived. Night amplifies uncertainty, vision narrows, imagination fills the gaps. Fear thrives in that space because the mind lacks confirmation. This is why vigilance matters more in darkness than in daylight. When the senses retreat, responsibility shifts inward. Prayer becomes a form of watchfulness, not passive hope, but deliberate attention. It is the decision to remain oriented toward truth when the environment offers little reinforcement. Fear enters when authority is surrendered. At night, authority is often abandoned through silence. Thoughts wander without structure. Worry becomes rehearsal. Anxiety gains legitimacy simply by repetition. Prayer interrupts that process. It imposes order where the mind would drift. It speaks when the internal voice begins to fracture. In this sense, prayer is not emotional comfort. It is cognitive alignment with authority beyond the self. The watchman did not panic at shadows. He held position. Prayer functions the same way. It replaces fear by establishing jurisdiction. When words are spoken with intention, the inner landscape reorganizes. Uncertainty loses its grip. Attention stabilizes. The individual is no longer reacting to imagined threats, but standing in alignment with something immovable. Authority is not loud. It is consistent. It does not chase fear away through force, but renders it irrelevant by clarity. This is why prayer in the night carries weight. It is vigilance chosen over surrender, order over chaos, presence over drift. When others rest, the one who prays does not escape the darkness. He governs it. Spoken words are not neutral. They organize space. They frame reality. When a word is spoken with intention, it alters the internal environment first, then extends outward. Silence leaves the atmosphere undefined, open to intrusion by whatever force is most persistent. Speech, especially disciplined speech, establishes structure. This is why prayer has always been vocal. Words draw lines where chaos would otherwise spread. The mind responds immediately to what is declared. Thoughts begin to align with what is spoken repeatedly. Dreams follow the same pattern. They are not random images, but reflections of what the mind has been permitted to dwell on. Emotions then follow, because emotion is shaped by interpretation. When prayer covers the mind, it filters what is allowed entry. Fear loses access. Confusion finds no foothold. The inner world becomes less reactive, more ordered. Atmosphere is shaped through repetition. One prayer spoken once may bring relief. Prayer spoken consistently establishes residence. It changes what feels normal in a space. Just as tension can linger in a room after conflict, peace can linger when it is declared daily. Over time, the environment adjusts. Resistance weakens not through confrontation, but through displacement. Darkness cannot settle where clarity is regularly installed. A barrier is not formed in a single moment. It is constructed through disciplined consistency. Each prayer adds another layer of structure, another boundary, another reinforcement. This is why inconsistency keeps people vulnerable. Gaps invite pressure. Silence creates openings. Consistent prayer closes those openings gradually until intrusion becomes difficult, then unlikely. Protection, then, is not accidental. It is built, layer by layer, word by word, night after night. Prayer does not merely ask for safety. It establishes order where disorder once had access. Over time, that order hardens into covering. Cycles do not announce themselves. They form through repetition that feels insignificant in the moment. A restless night here, a troubling dream there, a sudden wave of fear that appears without cause and fades by morning. Because nothing catastrophic happens, the pattern is dismissed. Yet repetition is how structure is built, both constructive and destructive. Over time, the mind begins to expect disturbance after dark, and expectation quietly shapes experience. Night becomes associated with vulnerability. The body learns the rhythm. As daylight fades, emotional defenses weaken automatically. Anxiety no longer needs a reason. Fear no longer requires a trigger. The response precedes the threat. This is how cycles gain power. They move from reaction to anticipation. Once anticipation is established, the battle is already half won by whatever force initiated it. These cycles are rarely dramatic because drama invites attention. Quiet patterns endure longer. They drain strength without confrontation. The same emotions return night after night, convincing the individual that this is simply how things are. Normalization is the final stage. When disruption feels familiar, resistance stops. Prayer interrupts this process at its foundation. It introduces an opposing rhythm, a new expectation. When prayer is spoken consistently at the same hour, the cycle is challenged before it completes itself. The mind no longer drifts into fear automatically. It is met by structure. The body associates night with authority instead of vulnerability. Patterns rely on predictability. They persist because nothing interrupts them. Prayer becomes the interruption, not through force, but through consistency. Each night prayer is spoken, the cycle weakens, the association shifts. What once triggered anxiety now signals alignment. Over time, the old pattern collapses under the weight of a new one. The enemy depends on silence and routine. Prayer replaces both with awareness and order. When the pattern breaks, the power behind it loses leverage. What once returned without effort now finds no place to settle. Authority is established through alignment. When a voice speaks in agreement with something higher than impulse or emotion, it carries weight beyond volume. Divine authority does not amplify noise. It clarifies direction. To align with it is to position the self within an ordered hierarchy, where fear is no longer the highest voice in the room. Speech then becomes an act of orientation, not expression. Words are chosen, not spilled. Silence, by contrast, creates a vacuum. The mind does not remain empty for long. When no structure is imposed, fear steps in to organize experience on its own terms. Worry fills the gap because it is active, persistent, and familiar. In silence, anxious thought rehearses future threats without resistance. The absence of speech is interpreted as consent. Fear is rarely confronted directly. It is allowed to speak because nothing interrupts it. Declarations interrupt that internal monologue. Spoken words slow thought and force precision. They draw boundaries around meaning. When truth is spoken aloud, it competes with fear on equal ground. The body hears it, the mind registers it, the environment adjusts. This is not symbolic, it is practical. The nervous system responds differently to externalized certainty than to internal speculation. Rest follows authority, not because circumstances change, but because orientation does. When the voice declares alignment with something stable, the mind no longer scans for threat constantly. Vigilance relaxes into confidence. The need to control diminishes. Sleep becomes possible without surrendering safety. Worry thrives where responsibility is assumed without capacity. Alignment with divine authority releases that burden. The individual no longer carries the weight of outcomes alone. Rest becomes an act of trust rather than escape. The voice has spoken. Order has been established. Silence that follows is no longer empty. It is held. Listening is not passive. It is disciplined restraint. In listening prayer, the voice grows quiet, but attention sharpens. The absence of speech does not signal disengagement. It signals trust. The mind remains oriented toward truth without attempting to control it. This posture allows faith to remain active even as conscious effort recedes. The subconscious does not require awareness to function. It absorbs patterns, expectations, and meanings beneath deliberate thought. When spiritual truth has been spoken and received, it continues to operate below the surface. Faith embeds itself there, influencing response, perception, and emotion long after the conscious mind steps back. This is why prayer before sleep carries forward through the night. The work has already been set in motion. Listening prayer sustains that motion. It holds space without interference. It resists the urge to fill silence with anxiety or demand immediate reassurance. In that restraint, alignment deepens. The individual remains receptive rather than reactive. Trust replaces effort. The need to manage outcomes dissolves. This is not withdrawal. It is cooperation with a process that does not depend on constant supervision. When the body rests, attention loosens its grip, but faith does not collapse. It shifts levels. What has been established consciously continues subconsciously. Order does not unravel simply because awareness fades. If anything, the absence of noise allows deeper processes to proceed without obstruction. Restoration occurs quietly, outside the reach of willpower. God's work does not require vigilance fueled by exhaustion. It requires alignment sustained by trust. Sleep becomes the setting where effort ends and continuation begins. The body releases control. The mind softens. Faith remains active beneath the surface, carrying intention forward. Rest no longer interrupts spiritual movement. It becomes the environment in which it continues uninterrupted. Rest is not avoidance. It is a declaration. To rest is to acknowledge that control has limits and that order does not depend entirely on personal vigilance. This decision requires trust. Without trust, rest feels irresponsible. With trust, rest becomes strength. The individual releases the compulsion to monitor every threat and instead aligns with a structure capable of holding what the mind cannot. Peace functions as resistance. Fear relies on urgency, on the belief that immediate reaction is necessary for survival. Calmness dismantles that belief. When the body remains steady, fear loses momentum. The absence of panic communicates safety to the nervous system. Threat perception weakens. Attention stabilizes. Peace does not deny the presence of danger. It refuses to amplify it. Anxiety thrives on false responsibility. It convinces the mind that outcomes depend solely on personal effort. This creates chronic vigilance and exhaustion. Such a state erodes clarity and invites further intrusion. Anxiety is noisy, impatient, and demanding. It fractures attention and accelerates thought. This is not alignment with truth. It is fragmentation. That is why anxiety cannot be mistaken for divine prompting. It does not produce clarity. It does not strengthen resolve. It drains. It confuses. It narrows vision until only threat remains. Peace, by contrast, expands perception. It allows discernment. It steadies the voice. It restores proportion. Resting in peace is therefore an act of spiritual alignment. It declares trust in an order greater than immediate circumstance. It rejects the illusion that constant worry is a form of responsibility. Calmness becomes authority exercised quietly. In that posture, fear-based attacks lose their leverage. Without urgency to exploit, they dissipate. Strength does not always advance. Sometimes it holds ground without strain. Peace does not announce itself with force. It remains, and in remaining it outlasts anxiety every time. Prayerful truth replaces noise by introducing order into the mental field. When words grounded in truth are spoken, the mind no longer drifts aimlessly through unresolved material. Thoughts are given direction. The endless replay of fears and memories loses momentum because attention is no longer feeding it. The mind cannot rehearse chaos and clarity at the same time. One displaces the other. Silence by itself is not peace. In the absence of structure, memory fills the space. Unresolved conversations resurface. Regrets replay with greater intensity. Fear borrows images from the past to predict the future. This is not reflection. It is rumination. Left unchecked, it becomes internal warfare, draining energy when the body is meant to recover. Prayer introduces a competing narrative, not through distraction, but through replacement. Truth spoken aloud interrupts the cycle. It challenges distorted interpretations and reorients perception. The nervous system responds to this shift. Breathing slows, muscle tension releases. The mind begins to recognize safety where it previously anticipated. Ending the day with prayer is a deliberate act of closure. It signals that evaluation is complete. The need to solve, replay, or prepare is suspended. Responsibility is transferred. This is not denial, it is timing. Some answers are not reached through further thought, but through rest. Mental warfare persists when boundaries are absent. Prayer establishes those boundaries. It declares which thoughts are permitted to remain and which are dismissed. Over time, the mind learns this structure. Silence no longer invites attack. It becomes space for restoration. The day ends not with unresolved conflict, but with alignment. The mind releases its grip. The body follows. What once escalated in quiet now settles. Noise gives way to order, and order prepares the ground for rest without resistance. Peace that covers more than one person becomes an environment. It extends beyond individual emotion and settles into shared space. When those under the same roof rest without tension, something structural has shifted. Conflict does not linger in the walls. Anxiety does not circulate unchecked. The atmosphere itself becomes stable, and stability is protective. A home is not merely a physical shelter. It is a domain shaped by what is spoken, tolerated, and repeated within it. Words leave residue. Emotions imprint patterns. When peace is established intentionally, it reorganizes the territory. Those who enter feel it immediately, even if they cannot explain it. The space resists intrusion not through force, but through order. Protection over a home is not achieved through isolation. It is achieved through alignment. When authority is established over doors, rooms, and surrounding space, boundaries become clear. Entry is regulated. Not everything that approaches is permitted to remain. This is not superstition. It is psychological and spiritual coherence. Clear boundaries reduce internal conflict, and reduced conflict strengthens resilience. When peace governs a space, those inside begin to synchronize with it. Sleep deepens, conversations soften, reactions slow. Fear loses its capacity to spread from one person to another. The home becomes a place of restoration rather than recovery. This matters because people do not leave their burdens at the door. They carry them inside. A stable environment absorbs shock without fracturing. Establishing such an environment requires consistency. Peace must be reinforced until it becomes the default. Silence filled with anxiety destabilizes. Silence filled with authority protects. Over time, the space itself participates in guarding those within it. The territory no longer reacts, it holds. As the night settles in, control must be released. Holding on to outcomes keeps the mind alert when it was never designed to carry tomorrow alone. Letting go before sleep is not weakness, it is wisdom. It acknowledges limits and places responsibility where it belongs. When control loosens, the body follows, and rest becomes possible without resistance. Trusting God with tomorrow changes the posture of the heart. The future no longer appears as a threat waiting to be managed. It becomes something already held. This shift quiets the mind because worry loses its purpose. There is no need to rehearse what is not yours to solve. Trust steadies thought and calms the nervous system in a way effort never can. Surrender brings deeper rest because it removes internal conflict. The struggle to stay vigilant ends. The need to protect, predict, and prepare dissolves. Rest stops being escape and becomes alignment. Sleep deepens when the soul is no longer divided between fear and faith. In surrender, peace is not forced. It arrives naturally. Entering sleep with expectation instead of dread transforms the night. The darkness no longer signals vulnerability. It becomes a place of renewal. What once felt uncertain now feels covered. You fall asleep knowing that work continues even as your body rests, and that morning will arrive with what you need. If this prayer and understanding spoke to you, take a moment to like this video. It helps this message reach others who need it. And subscribe to Holy Authority for more prayer, truth, and spiritual strength as you walk in confidence and peace.